Hey, what's up YouTube? King James here. Season 2 of Warzone. Is it going to be called AUG Zone or M16 Zone? Sort of like Season 1 was DMR Zone? I don't know. These two guns are taking over Warzone. I've seen M16 and AUGs in a lot of loadouts lately. And for good reason. They're both really good. And I've got a bit of a comparison today for you of the AUG versus the M16. I just did an updated M16 video, so this is an updated AUG video, but I'm going to actually compare the AUG and the M16 a tiny bit together to give you an idea which one, if you're still leveling guns, which one maybe you might want to level. So let's get right into it. So the first thing we should really look at when we're talking about the M16 versus the AUG is let's have a look at the damage and the effective damage range. And they're exactly the same on these two guns. They both do 72 to the head and 40 to the chest and extremities. And there's no change in the drop-off. So these guns essentially have no effective damage range. And I'll tell you why that's important in a second. But the fire rate, well, they're a little different between the two. I'll show you some updated stats on those because I think a bunch of this is Season 1 stats. But the damage is still the same, and the effective damage range, that's also still the same. But let me show you some of the attachments on my gun and then why this information right here matters. All right, so let's talk about the barrel first, because that's sort of what sets the AUG and the M16 apart. And they buffed the AUG in Season 2 quite a bit. It's actually got more bullet velocity than the M16 does. And if you checked out my M16 video that I just put up a couple of days ago, I'll link it right here for you. I recommended the exact same barrel in the M16 for the exact same reasons as this. And let me show you a quick chart. So you can see right here on the AUG, the Strike Team barrel, it's moving the bullet velocity from 600 to 900. 50% is the maximum bullet velocity increase you can get on a gun. And if you're not exactly sure what bullet velocity is, that's the time it takes for the bullet to travel from your barrel to hit the target. The higher that is, the less bullet drop you have, and the less you have to lead your shots. So higher bullet velocity is always better. It's not everything, but it is better to have higher bullet velocity. And you see here on the M16, the bullet velocity is only 805. So it's actually a little bit less. It only gets about a 34% increase versus a 50% increase. It is more. It's not a ton of difference, but the more you got, the better it is. And they both get a tiny bit of a rate of fire improvement, and the AUG actually has a slightly higher rate of fire than the M16 does. So when you add the Strike Team barrel to the AUG, you get higher bullet velocity and a higher rate of fire versus the M16. And if you remember earlier, I mentioned about effective damage range. Well, I've seen some builds and they're recommending using a bunch of the different lasers, but they're only recommending them because of effective damage range. But these guns don't even have effective damage range. They have the same amount of damage no matter how far away you are. So adding one of these on doesn't make any difference at all. You don't need to make that 80 meters with the 72 head damage down to 60 meters because it's 72 after anyway. So there's no point in running any of the lasers on these guns because there's no improvement on effective damage range at all. Now, if you like to hip fire, sure, you can get some hip fire, or if you want, again, hip fire, aim movement speed, but none of these really have any benefit. I wouldn't run any lasers on the guns at all. For the muzzle, I'm running the SOCOM Eliminator. I tried both the infantry and the SOCOM Eliminator, and I'll show you a quick video on that. For now, until the agency silencer is fixed, when this is fixed, I would run it. Here it doesn't even say that it has, again, the minus is effective damage range. It has no effective damage range, but it doesn't say negative to bullet velocity, but it is. It's still minus 40, so don't run it until it's fixed. But let me show you the video real quick on the SOCOM versus the infantry. So I did a quick burst test here, and I just did a bunch on the bottom, moving over after each one, and I ran up and had a look at the pattern. And I'll just fast forward it here a little bit so you can see it. Now the pattern, I found that I think this SOCOM was a little bit tighter, but then I did an actual test where I was shooting them together, and I'll show you that right now. You can see here I'm just doing a bunch of shooting and I'm trying to control the recoil. Now if I fast forward and go and look up at the pattern, you see here the SOCOM is definitely tighter than the infantry. So I found that I had less vertical recoil and horizontal recoil with the SOCOM than I did on the infantry. So I decided to run the SOCOM barrel on the AUG, which is the same result as I found on the M16. For the underbarrel, I'm running the SFOD speed grip. I tested the field agent, and I'll show you a quick side-by-side of those. Bruiser grip, if you were using that, that's out because they fixed that now with Season 2, so don't be using the bruiser anymore. Let me show you the side-by-side of these two grips. So again, I did a quick burst test on these and shot a bunch of spots. Here, I'll fast forward to it here and run up. And I'm not sure I found a whole lot of difference when I was just doing the quick burst test. It did look like the SFOD was a little closer together, but then I did the burst test where I was controlling it, and I'll run that here. Right here where I was aiming at the wall and just taking a whole bunch of shots. I'll fast forward here to where I run up, and I found that again, with the SFOD, it was tighter and a bit more controlled. I just found that the grouping on this one, I tested it a few times. This is just the one I'm including with the video, but I found that it was always like this, really tightly grouped together and just a tiny bit better than the field agent. But remember, this is only at 15 meters. If you're shooting a guy 100 or 150 meters, the tighter this is at 15 meters, the tighter and closer it's going to be at 150, because it's just going to get exponentially worse as you go farther away. So the SFOD is the grip you want to use. Ironically, also the same on the M16. For the ammunition on the AUG, I'm using the 45 round drum. I didn't find a whole lot of benefit to going up to the other ones, and this one here had no cons, so no ADS penalty and no movement speed penalty. So I found that that was plenty, especially on the burst rifle. For the optic, now this is where things can get a little interesting, because one thing to know about the AUG is it comes with an optic on it, and it's about a 1x scope. And I tried it out, and if you notice in some of my videos, the optics were different. Well, let me show you why in a second, because I was trying out the stock or the base optic versus a Vision Tech 2X versus the Axial Arms 3X. These are probably the three most popular, the two most popular optics that you use in the game, plus the AUG's built-in optic. So one thing about the built-in optic, if you can run with the built-in optic, which I'll show you in a second, you can run a stock, which you can't do on the M16, because the M16 doesn't come with an optic unless you run iron sights. So in this one here, I was running the SAS Combat, or I'd run the Raider if I had it unlocked. I don't quite have it unlocked yet, but you could run either or, and there's only just a slightly difference in the mobility between the two. So you can certainly run the stock if you want to and use the built-in optic. But let me show you the difference between the optics to decide whether you think you could live with the base optic versus the 2 or the 3X. All right, so here's the three optics together. You can see the base, it has some level of zoom. It looks like a 1X, and then the Vision 2X is a little closer, and then the Axial Arms, again, is a little closer in. And you can see the zoom difference between them, right? I can see the whole house here. I can see some of the house, and here I'm zoomed right into the whole building. So you can decide how much zoom you want, but if you can live with just this optic, sort of like optic iron sights, and I know a lot of guys like to run iron sights, I do too, and if you can live with it, you can run the stock on this with this gun. Otherwise, if you really like the Axial Arms 3X, which is a really great optic, you'll run that instead of the Combat or the Raider stock. And this is how I would build my AUG. All right, so what's the final word? Well, the AUG has a bit more flexibility, and I think on paper, it's a tiny bit better than the M16. 900 meters per second bullet velocity versus 800. 545 rounds per minute versus 500 on the M16. So on paper, it's a little bit better. What you want to do is probably try both and see which one you like better. I mean, in Season 1, I like the M16 better than the AUG, but that's because it was stronger at range. But the AUG is now stronger at range, so I'm going to give it a more serious try again in Season 2 and see which one I like better. But they both really play quite similar. Where the AUG really has a little bit of difference is because it's got the built-in optic. If you can run the built-in optic, it gives you the opportunity to run a stock, which you can't do on the M16, because you're probably not going to run the M16 on iron sights as your mid or long-range gun. So give it a try. Let me know what your thoughts. Hit me up in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think. And as always, guys, if you don't see me in Warzone, if you don't see me in multiplayer, it's only a matter of time, baby. King James out.